Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Hoagland. I am the Northeast Regional TSP Technical Service Provider Coordinator for NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We're pleased today to present to you the TSP update training. This is something that we're going to be doing hopefully quarterly moving forward. And we just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We've got a couple folks trickling in. But if you could, please go ahead and turn off your video, mute your microphone. Please be aware that this session is being recorded. And if you could enter any chat questions that you have into the chat box, or also into the question and answer box as well. Again, my name is Peter Hoagland, and I am the Northeast Regional Technical Service Provider Coordinator. Here is the Technical Service Provider Program coordinators by region. And we are here as a resource to help technical service providers through application processing, through ins and outs of the Technical Service Provider Program. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and announce our presenters today. We're pleased to present Tim Pilkowski. He is the National Nutrient Management Discipline Lead. Tim is the National Nutrient Management Specialist for the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, in the Ecological Sciences Division. Tim has over 35 years of diversified nutrient management experience derived from service in both the federal and state governments, as well as private industry. Tim joined NRCS back in 2004 as the Maryland State Conservation Agronomist. In 2009, he moved to national headquarters where he served under the Technical Service Provider Program team. And since 2021 has served as the NRCS National Discipline Lead for Nutrient Management. We are also pleased to have Joe Bagden with us. Joe Bagden is the Nutrient and Pest Management Specialist. He is an agronomist on the NRCS National Water Quality and Quantity Technology Development Team. He has almost 40 years of experience with nutrient and pest management impacts on water quality. Joe is in Amherst, Massachusetts, near where he grew up on a small dairy farm and vegetable and tobacco farm. Joe specializes in environmental risk analysis technology for nutrient and pesticide application. His goal is to provide planning tools that can help support site-specific nutrient and pest management for water quality protection.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Peter. Again, I'm Tim Pilkowski. I'm the National Nutrient Management Discipline Lead for NRCS. Thank you all for having myself and Joe Bagden here today. Joe, as Peter said, is from the Water Quality and Quantity team. First, I wanted to say I appreciate all the hard work that you do as TSPs, consultants, etc., to help our producers develop and implement nutrient management plans and activities under NRCS. Recently, we've been working very hard internally in regards to improving nutrient use efficiency when managing nutrients. And we wanted to provide to you all, first I want to provide some background information on why we're making some of these improvements, some of the changes that we're going to be doing within NRCS with nutrient management. And then this is going to really lead to provide some of the new opportunities for TSPs and consultants moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to turn my camera off just so we can save on bandwidth and hope you don't lose me. Peter, you can see my screen, everything okay?
That's correct. I can see you.
Great.
See you great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So within NRCS, we provide many opportunities for improved nutrient management to better address our water quality. We have precision agriculture, in-season technologies, enhanced efficiency fertilizers. But unfortunately, within nutrient management, we often tend to stay focused on the minimums, especially when it comes to evaluating, say, for example, field site risk potential for the loss of nutrients. So moving forward with NRCS, we want to provide more emphasis on the variability between fields and within fields. By using all the 4 Rs of nutrient management techniques that we prescribe to address each field's unique limitations. You might say specifically sort of tailoring the R or Rs needed to address the field's risk of loss potential for nutrients. To accomplish this, we need to integrate nutrient management and other conservation practices to leverage those benefits for site-specific management for water quality protection. So to support these changes, we need what I feel is a system of credits that really kind of give a range of nutrient management benefits, all the way up from, say, the very basic of nutrient management budgeting, all the way up to nutrient management or intense nutrient management that, say, dynamically spoon feeds the crop only exactly when that nutrient is needed, when and where. Again, to increase production and also to address environmental benefits. Today's training will provide an overview of the current and future NRCS national nutrient management activities, as well as some new tools or new tool and procedures available to support the effort to increase nutrient management intensity for site risk for nutrient loss. I'm going to speak first, and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe Bagden from the water quality team, and he's going to provide an overview and a demo of a new tool that we have for technical service providers. So first up, real quick, what is NRCS nutrient management? So in short, NRCS nutrient management involves managing nutrients and soil amendments to maximize economic benefit, but with emphasis on minimizing that environmental impact. Very important. We want to stay focused a little bit more on minimizing those environmental impacts. That's what I want to talk more about today. Proper nutrient management considers several factors when applying nutrients. One of those factors we want to focus on in moving forward with NRCS is addressing the associated risk of applying those nutrients to protect our air, water quality, soils, etc. In order to address all potential nutrient losses in all pathways, NRCS nutrient management needs to support nutrient management at a higher intensity, so that because nutrient management can be highly variable. So the goal here is to match the intensity of nutrient management to the level of risk for that particular site. And again, this will require tailoring all those 4 Rs in nutrient management or stewardship to each site-specific, conditions or limitations. Nutrient management involves using crop nutrients effectively as possible to improve productivity, but also to protect the environment. The key principle behind nutrient management is balancing that soil nutrient inputs with those crop requirements. When applied, nutrients applied properly at the right time, the right source, the right rate, added nutrients can help achieve these crop yields and crop goals. It does not make any economic sense that can harm the environment if we're not utilizing these nutrients effectively. Nutrients that are not effectively utilized by crops can potentially leach into groundwater and also nearby surface waters. Under USDA, nutrient management is also considered a climate-smart mitigation activity. Excess nutrients on the land can lead to nitrogen losses to the atmosphere, and nutrient management, it maximizes current nutrient uptake and has compelling and cost-effective role in playing in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. So I kind of want to give you a little bit of background as far as why we're making some of the improvements or changes within NRCS for nutrient management. In response to a report findings in alignment with USDA strategic plan, NRCS developed a operational plan called the Nutrient Loss Action Plan. One of the main efforts, or actually the Nutrient Loss Action Plan came at the start of what we call these, it was under the SEEP1 and SEEP2 reports. And I'm actually looking for information I have on that, and I don't seem to have it in front of me. But the SEEP1 and SEEP2 reports, if you're not familiar with them, they are reports that are developed under NRCS. This is a kind of a way to assess nutrient management conservation practices and see how they assess on the land. There were very, very good reports. There were a lot of wins with SEEP under nutrient management. As far as variable rate nutrient application, those increased hugely within nutrient management. We also had with variable rate nutrient application, nutrient use, enhanced efficiency fertilizers. They did very well. They actually increased about sixfold. Variable rate nutrient application actually quadrupled. But we also had some problems within nutrient management as well. We had issues with leaching of nitrogen and soluble phosphorus loss. That was one of the problems that we identified within the SEEP reports. So one of the things that we did to address these findings within SEEP, and again, this was some of the things that we found in SEEP that were negative impacts on nutrient management. We developed what we call internally a nutrient loss action plan. This was developed to identify those changing trends in nutrient management, for example, climate change, while enhancing existing conservation efforts and outcomes. There were specific goals that were created to improve nutrient management with our producers. One of the main efforts that the nutrient loss action plan, this is an internal operation that yielded the development of what we call the smart nutrient management concept. You may have seen this on our website. I have a couple of links here to the website as far as what that entails, but this really broadly recognizes the 4 R's of nutrient stewardship: the right source, the right method, the right rate, and the right time. But what we also wanted to do here was pull in that assessment component. And the graph that I have on here was created to reinforce that understanding of nutrient management planning and this smart approach with assessment. So the assessment approach is sort of the main emphasis with moving forward with an NRCS and our 590 standard. The key here is every plot of land is different. All cropped areas need nutrient management to address nitrogen and phosphorus loss potential. But based on the soils and the climate, some areas of nutrient management may need to be more intense than others in order to protect water quality. The key part of nutrient management planning is assessing that site-specific conditions of the land and operation to determine, what is needed. Again, the core change that we wanted to make here is the way NRCS nutrient management is applied to go beyond just supporting more of a minimum criteria, but to look more at the potential of intense nutrient management to increase efficiency and site-specific nutrient loss. Better nutrient management, and again, that key word here is management, is especially important for soluble nutrient losses, because most of our conservation practices are only really effective for reducing losses from sediment. So I wanted to kind of go through some of the 4 R's and how this relates to that SMART concept real quickly. The first really is source. What types of nutrients should we use? As we all know, farmers, they apply commercial fertilizers, say manure, soil amendments, organic byproducts to provide nutrients for their crops. But when determining that nutrient source that's best for the operation, of course, we want to choose the right source to best match the needs for the crop and also the soil, so we can minimize the site risk of nutrient loss. So, needs vary depending on local soil and climate conditions, specific crop, other conservation practices that are being implemented, such as reduced tillage, no-till, and even cover crops. All of these should be considered um, um, when in nutrient management. Sorry, let me go back. I just want to finish one more thought. We want to select those nutrients based on the utilization needs of that producer. Um, Say, for example, if you have a new planting, you may need to delay uptake after seed germination, or you may have an established crop that's ready to take nutrients immediately. The most important thing that I kind of wanted to emphasize here is testing. Testing, I think, I feel is a key component in nutrient management planning. Testing the soil to confirm what nutrient needs are, what are present in the soil. Soil tests can help identify key nutrients in the soil, but also testing of the manure and organic byproducts. Testing that manure for nutrient content can help with crop nutrient needs to be applied more efficiently. Of course, this can lead to increased profit and also reducing the risk of pollution. So move on. So next is how are those nutrients being applied? For effective nutrient management, the method of application can make all the difference when determining how and where to apply those nutrients. So some of the things I listed here are injection, getting nutrients down below that surface of the soil into the root zone to the crop, so it increases plant availability so that the nutrients of the plant can access them. Injecting nutrients is really one way to deliver them exactly where they are needed. Incorporation, specific sites may require nutrients to be incorporated into the soil, not just broadcast or surface applied, but where plants can adequately access them again and reduce the roots loss of nutrient loss due to weather events. Nutrient placement, I feel, in a planter or injection with no-till, low disturbance and application tools. These are all effective methods for incorporation of nutrients. Also, other practices combined with other practices of incorporation or injection, say, are not practical, combined with, say, in-field conservation practices with, say, for example, edge-of-field practices to reduce nutrient losses. And then, of course, we have GPS and other technologies. Different parts of the land may need different nutrient requirements. GPS systems and variable rate application systems are some of the newer technologies that can really help make sure that you're applying the nutrients at the right amounts in the right place. So also the rate. There are many factors that affect rate or the amount of nutrients that are needed for that particular crop. When determining the rate of application, testing, again, very, very important. Having the soil, the plants, and the nutrient source tested will let you know what the nutrients are needed, how much, and if you need to apply any more, given the source that you have or how much. Soil health practices, such as utilizing no-till or cover crops. These conservation practices, they naturally increase soil organic matter, increase biological processes, and of course, thereby reduce the need for fertilizer. And of course, technology, again, variable rate application technology can improve nutrient efficiency by delivering that specific amount according to historical needs, and also testing the soils for nutrient levels. And again, timing. Appropriate timing, the application of nutrients is really, I think, the most critical. When applying those nutrients, look at the crop demand. Nutrients should be applied when those crops need them the most to maximize uptake and effectiveness. You may split apply nitrogen, for instance, to deliver those nutrients at targeted times, during the growing season. Weather and seasonal conditions, application of fertilizer immediately before a large rainfall, that could contribute to a large amount of significant nutrient loss. Recently with the rains that we've been getting here, if we had any nutrients that were applied, we probably lost the majority of those. Technology available, Technology such as precision guidance systems allow producers to, apply those nutrients more effectively with actively growing crops even. And again, testing. Tissue testing during the season is a valuable diagnostic tool, I feel, that can aid with managing soil fertility. Routine testing on crops should be carried out mid-season, I believe, to determine, whether that crop has sufficient nutrient supply. And last, I wanted to focus more on the assessment approach and really kind of talk about the fact that, each plot of land out there is different. A key part of NRCS nutrient management planning in moving forward is assessing the site-specific conditions of the land and operation to determine, really what is needed. All conditions of the farm must be considered because each affects the others. In addition, as changes are, made on the operation, on-site conditions, need to be reassessed, and the plan again should be adjusted accordingly. A certified nutrient management planner, or TSP, should analyze, and I'm sorry, the slide, I actually have a picture here and it's covering some of it, should be analyzing risk assessment information and utilize that to draft a nutrient management plan to address any limitations on that particular site. Current or planned practices should be looked at, such as use of cover crops, no-till, conservation tillage. All of this should be assessed when determining how this might affect nutrient requirements and reduce nutrient losses. And again, testing. Testing and analysis can tell you, what nutrients are already present in the soil, the source for the plant, and also determine what nutrients are needed from that source. So in order to prepare for some of the changes in FY25 that we are making for NRCS, roughly we're updating the Conservation Practice Standard 590 and also policy. We've spent probably the last year and a half updating several internal conservation assessment items for evaluating the producer's current management of nutrients. So we have internally what we call nutrient management assessment narratives and nutrient management planning criteria. And also, you're probably familiar with our funding mechanisms for nutrient management. All of these have been updated during FY23 and 24 and are available now. I don't want to spend too much time on this part of the internal assessment. This is more for internal. What I am showing here, though, is the concept of evaluating different levels of nutrient management intensity that can help address the variable risk of nutrient loss. So the idea here is to look at the potential for a more intensive nutrient management to increase the efficiency and reduce the loss. These levels, or these narratives, are all based on the 4 R's of nutrient stewardship, but each of these identifies a different level of management intensity that producers can use that will have a different level of conservation benefit for reaching that potential for say, nutrient loss. You might want to say it's all 4 R's working together. The first 3 of these narratives really are for increasing levels of production and efficiency, which inherently will reduce nutrient loss. And the 4th narrative is for really maximizing nutrient loss mitigation for site-specific loss in that particular field that is being planned. So, as I mentioned earlier, the main emphasis for improving nutrient management moving forward with NRCS is addressing the field's risk of nutrient loss from surface water as well as groundwater. Again, the majority of NRCS conservation practices mainly address more sediment runoff when it comes to nutrient management. So we really need to look at better overall management of nutrients to address examples for subsurface nitrogen and also soluble phosphorus losses, which again was pointed out in our reports, our SEEP reports. From a water quality perspective, leaching can have a huge impact on surface water as well as groundwater, especially when the field has drainage outlets, tile, and surface water can impact groundwater as well. So the first step, to process is to manage the field based on that risk of nutrient loss through those nutrient pathways, considering all the 4 R's to help address that particular site's vulnerability. Move on. So I don't want to spend too much time here, but there were some changes and improvements made to the nutrient management national funding mechanisms or payments. These are available for FY24. They now include more emphasis on utilizing the 4 R's of nutrient stewardship and include more of a risk assessment approach based on, again, the nutrient loss action plan as well as the smart nutrient management concept or campaign that I mentioned earlier. I did place a link in this slide, which goes to the publicly available financial assistance information for our programs and includes nutrient management under EQIP. So therefore, they're there in case you want to look. So before I ask Joe to come on board and talk about the site risk for water quality tool or this new tool, I wanted to briefly review some of the documents that are specifically used by TSPs or qualified individuals to provide that nutrient management assistance to our producers. So first up is CEMAs. So I'm not sure if everybody understands or knows what a CEMA is, but a CEMA is a conservation, evaluation, and monitoring activity. These are not plans. They are reports which provide, say, an evaluation, a monitoring, or an assessment of a particular area, saying this would be soil. Basically, they are used to complete practice implementation requirements, or they can be used to determine the effectiveness of conservation practices or activities. CEMA 217, which is the soil and source testing for nutrient management. This is widely used under nutrient management, and it's a great avenue to provide soil and manure testing for your producers. CEMA 217 involves a sampling strategy for measuring and evaluating nutrient levels from the soil, or again, source, or even from irrigation water. These are performed by a qualified individual that has the qualifications to develop the report on these, and I'll go through that in a second, but there are many CEMAs available depending on the evaluation, monitoring, or assessment needs of that producer. This is just one of them, but I placed a link in there to other avenues as far as other CEMAs, and I'll talk a little bit about DIAs in a minute as well. So the CEMAs, or particularly the 217 CEMA, this must be completed by what we call a qualified individual, or it can be by a TSP that has those same qualified individual those requirements. Again, they must have the proper certification in nutrient management, the TSP, in order to meet the 217 requirements. So what is a qualified individual? Each CEMA has its own set of requirements of who can perform, that service. Very important that participants know the following qualified individual requirements to ensure that the person that they hire is a good match for their needs and their objectives. So the CEMA 217, I actually specifically spelled out in that CEMA document who can perform this function. Again, a qualified individual does not have to be a certified TSP, but there are certain requirements within for a qualified individual. They must have a minimum of 2 years training experience in soil, water, and nutrient collection. Other qualified folks include, say, for example, under professional organizations, such as the American Society of Agronomy, being a certified crop advisor, certified professional agronomist, even ag retailers with crop consultant experience or 4R experience, all may qualify to plan a CEMA. Um, I really like these SEMA 217s these can be used at any time during the planning process. They can be used to obtain soil and manure analysis, whether that farm needs new analysis or has never had anything taken, or their analysis is out of date. So really, really nice. Um, there are several options within the SEMA 217, including soil manure testing. We offer zone and grid sampling, source water testing. Also, I just added for FY24 small scale operations. That includes garden plots and also raised beds. Uh, So next up, I wanted to talk a little bit about the DIA 157, or the design and implementation activity. I believe you're probably already familiar with these, but if not, a DIA is defined as the planning and designing of a single practice or a combination of structural, vegetative, or land management practices. Um, um, and management activities to treat one or more resource concerns. So the DIA 157 enables a TSP to develop a nutrient management plan based on Practice Standard 590. This replaced the old CAP, or Conservation Activity Plan 104, you may be more familiar with. But the DIA 157 must be developed by a technical service provider certified under the TSP registry system under nutrient management. There are specific requirements that need to be met, such as training, experience, education, in order to become certified. The DIA nutrient management should really document the management techniques for nutrients based on the 4 R's of nutrient stewardship. Again, applying the right source, the right rate at the right time at the right place, but then also bringing in the assessment component based on the inherent risk of nutrient loss to that site. And again, in order to improve nutrient use efficiency for that crop and reduce nutrient losses to surface and groundwater and also to the atmosphere. So, all of these items that I've just mentioned for improving nutrient management, we need the assistance even more of our TSPs to be successful. We rely heavily on technical service providers to either deliver nutrient management to our producers. While some states do, write nutrient management plans, particularly CNMPs, the majority of our nutrient management plans are developed by technical service providers. So, moving forward with NRCS, we want TSPs and CCAs and so forth to know, understand, and incorporate that site risk information into their 4R decision-making process so that we can balance the production with those conservation needs when we're developing these plans moving forward. It's never going to be a sort of one-size-fits-all. Nutrient management really needs to be tailored specifically to emphasize the correct management for a given situation, for that field, at that crop, at that time. Better overall decisions in regards to when and how to apply those nutrients. Since most of the NRCS nutrient management plans are not developed by staff, being developed by technical service providers, one of the long-term barriers that we faced in using TSPs is the fact that they cannot access the internal assessment tools that we use when evaluating that producer's farm. Those tools that I showed you earlier, where the narratives and some of those things that are associated with what we call CART, and Joe's going to talk a little bit more of that. Our TSPs can't access that information. We can get it from NRCS or the producer, but we can't access it. So some of this information that I provided earlier, again, is only available to NRCS. So TSPs, certified crop advisors, our consultants, they need to access this same conservation assessment information that we use internally to enable them to tailor their nutrient management plans for that site-specific nutrient loss. So recently, there was a huge breakthrough to help address this issue. Um, to provide site risk information, including nitrogen and phosphorus surface, as well as leaching loss and sediment loss. Um, we developed internally a new, what we call the Site Risk for Water Quality tool. This was launched back in October of 2023. The new tool was developed, it was developed internally to provide that same internal risk assessment information now that we can provide now to technical service providers. And it has a mapping sequence to it, can visualize how risk of nutrient loss varies across that landscape. Um, the information can now be utilized by our TSPs, certified crop advisors, other consultants to tailor the nutrient management plans to address each site's risk for nutrient loss. So I'm going to stop there. And this actually leads directly into Joe Bag, and he's up next, and is going to talk and give an overview of the Site Risk for Water Quality tool. And then afterwards, I believe if we have time, we're going to provide a demo of that tool as well.
Let's see the users light up that Q&A, because we want to try to project as much interactivity as we can. We'd like to hear from you. Good, bad, questions, comments. That's kind of what this process is meant to support. So to follow up on what Tim said, the Site Risk for Water Quality tool, I want to give you a little more background. Tim mentioned CART. That's an acronym for Conservation Assessment and Ranking Tool that NRCS uses internally for planning support and program support. So CART is stacked on site risk and practice benefits, basically, to try to support better conservation outcomes. So we try to focus on sites that have risk that needs to be addressed with practices that have benefits for those kinds of risks. So its main purpose is to organize benefits based on the risk that those specific benefits are needed to address. It's kind of a targeting tool. It's kind of an accounting tool in terms of giving conservation benefits to the right conservation systems based on what the site needs. So the criteria is a site-specific planning threshold for water quality, and that relates to nutrient management. And as Tim said, in the Site Risk for Water Quality tool, we want to provide the same background that our planners use internally. And there's lots of good reasons for that, because as Tim showed those narratives, our planners are choosing those narratives to try to address what a site's needs are. And then oftentimes the ball goes to the TSP court to develop a nutrient management plan that fits back into that conservation plan. So it's important to have the same site risk information on both sides, both at the original planning level and when you folks are developing nutrient management plans that are going to fit back into that conservation plan. You need to be shooting at the same targets, the same risk profiles. So the Site Risk for Water Quality tool provides public access to the CART planning thresholds that we use internally, and they apply to nutrient management, but they also apply to all the other practices that we try to apply as part of a system that includes nutrient management. So we use this as kind of an integrator across conservation practices to address a particular site's type of needs. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through this in detail. It's just a picture to show you the background. I want to illustrate that there is a methodology behind those planning thresholds. It's based on soil properties, climate, and the amount of irrigation. So for this particular example, the soil properties resulted in a low, and the R factor or climate factor resulted in a moderate. So for phosphorus surface loss, the threshold is 15 points. You can see that the range is from 15 to 100. So low soil risk, low rainfall risk, 15, high soil risk, high rainfall risk, threshold is 100. It's pretty common sense in terms of higher risk with a higher driver, the rainfall plus irrigation needs more mitigation. That's what's behind these planning thresholds. These are now illustrated internally in CART in this kind of report. So the thresholds are in this rightmost column. This large blue arrow shows the specific thresholds for a particular planning area. And in this case, the non-point phosphorus leaching threshold was low, 20 in a range of 10 to 55. For nitrogen surface loss, it was low, 30 in a range of 25 to 90. And for phosphorus surface loss, it was also low, 15, bottom of the range, 15 to 100 that we just looked at. That's where this number came from. But for nitrogen leaching loss, the threshold is 45. And the ranges for this particular resource concern are 25 to 50. So it's almost maxed out in terms of risk for this particular planning threshold for this field. So as a conservation planner, we would internally be quite concerned about this. This would be a high threshold to meet, and also a very difficult threshold to meet with conservation practices other than nutrient management, because most conservation practices don't really mitigate nitrogen leaching. We're really going to have to lean heavily on nutrient management to address this site's leaching potential. Maybe cover crop can work with nutrient management, but that's almost it. So we're going to need more than the minimum from nutrient management to address this particular site's risk profile. And that's kind of the underlying thought behind the presentation today. We want to try to provide the same risk thresholds to nutrient management planners so they can try to adjust the 4 R's of nutrient management to address a site's risk profile. And then that can be fit back in more easily into the overall conservation plan that fits nutrient management in with all the other practices that address the needs of this particular site or a particular site. So the site risk for water quality tool asks you to delineate the field as an area of interest. We can't yet read in your geometry from other tools, but we're working on that. For now, you have to delineate the field yourself. You'll get a map of the CART SVI ratings, the Soil Vulnerability Index ratings for both leaching and runoff. So you'll get to see a map of the field that you're planning and the way that the underlying soils cause variability in these planning thresholds. So as a nutrient management planner, you might think about managing part of the field differently, if that could work, or what's represented behind the field's overall risk profile in terms of the amount of variation. Is there a lot of variation? Is it all the way from low to high? Is it close to the same class? Is it all the same class? You start to think about, are there opportunities to tailor the way I do nutrient management on that field to address its underlying risk profile for nutrient loss? That's what we're trying to support, that conversation, that thought process between the nutrient management planner and the conservation planner. It gets a little more complicated because there's going to be individual thresholds for nitrogen leaching loss, phosphorus leaching loss, nitrogen surface loss, phosphorus surface loss, and sediment transport. So we have to be a little bit creative and focus on the higher risk ones and make sure we're solving the riddle, if you will, as best we can from a nutrient management standpoint for those members of this list that predominate for a particular field. It's not an exact science. In the end, we're going to have to meet all the thresholds, and we're going to try to balance whatever can be done in the nutrient management arena with additional practices. But the furthest we can go within the nutrient management world, the better in terms of addressing a site's risk profile. And our goal is to support all 4 R's to address that site risk of nutrient loss, not just a reduced rate or a rate that's justified over the crop rotation, but the dynamic nature of nutrient management and its potential to reduce nutrient loss. So we want to support the whole range of nutrient management benefits, from just meeting minimum, so to speak, to going to a dynamic spoon feeding kind of situation where we can really help address a high risk profile and still have good economics and still have good production, because we've balanced the propensity for nutrient loss with the intensity of nutrient management to address both a reduction in that loss potential and an increase in profit in that kind of high risk situation. And then, as I said, integrate nutrient management back into the overall conservation plan. We are trying to balance the load on the servers, so we are expecting more and more use over time, and we keep adjusting for that. But this is what the entry will look like, and it's, with most other tools, a matter of trying to get to the field that you're interested in. You can type in addresses, as you can in other GIS tools that we support. I type in a zip code myself, at least to get close, and then I move from there. It's my preferred method, but if you're in a big county, you probably have to get to the address level. So I typed in a zip code, and I hit the magnifying glass, and I'm in the middle of my little town. I'm going to use this as an example because I'm familiar with it. This is the tool that you choose to draw a polygon. Go to the field in question. I'm going to try to digitize this field roughly. Not too hard. This is right on the banks of the Connecticut River, which is the watershed for a big part of New England. So I've digitized the field. Down in this left panel is the additional inputs that you put into the tool for a result report for this area. If there were irrigation, I could choose how much is the maximum irrigation. I won't do that. If there's drainage, if there's furrow irrigation, I'm not going to do any of that. I prefer the green-red color scheme, but there's 4 different color schemes, the 508 compliance, whatever your preferred color scheme is. I recommend trying them all. I really like the green-red because it's kind of the classic. Green is good, red is a concern. As simple as hitting the map, create the map, and you will get a result for that field that you identified. That result, in this case, that you're looking at on the map is the leaching rating. It's not the planting threshold yet, but it's the leaching rating. You can switch between the leaching rating and the surface runoff rating with this choice. And you see the analog now for the surface rating, and this changed to surface runoff. So the map is for you as a planner to look at how the soils underlying this field vary and how that leads to variability in the soil vulnerability rating for leaching and for surface runoff. That's the first part of the equation. The second part of the equation is these planting thresholds for leaching and runoff. That's where the amount of rainfall comes in. That's where irrigation comes in, drainage for irrigation. Some high-level management criteria come in to taking these vulnerability ratings and modifying them to address what we would expect to be a risk profile that results in the planting thresholds that you're seeing here. So for nitrogen leaching, the planting threshold for this field, this would be an area weighted average of the variability you're seeing here. It wouldn't be the worst, it wouldn't be the middle, it would be an area weighted average of all the contributing soil for this field. There's a reason for that, and I'll talk about it in a second, but first I want to get across that this leaching threshold for nitrogen of 35 represents that whole field, the whole area that you identified. The phosphorus threshold is 25. For runoff, if we switch to runoff, oh, I was in runoff, sorry. I should have done this while I was talking about that. These leaching thresholds link back to this leaching soil vulnerability index for leaching, the 35 and 25. And then as we switch to runoff, the map changed to runoff. These thresholds did not down here, but I wanted to show you what they were representing. Be 40 points for nitrogen surface runoff, 40 points for phosphorus surface runoff, and 30 points for sediment runoff. So these are the same thresholds that are in CART that the conservation planner needs to meet. So they could be met for runoff with a reduced tillage practice or an edge of field practice, as well as nutrient management. So there's a larger toolbox to achieve these thresholds. But for the leaching thresholds, it's primarily nutrient management and cover crop for nitrogen leaching. So in terms of your work as nutrient management planners, I think oftentimes you're going to be challenged by trying to address these leaching thresholds as much as possible with the nutrient management plan that you develop for this particular area. That would be the goal. As I said before, when you switch back and forth between maps, the thresholds don't change. But if you knew this field, for instance, had irrigation on it, which it happens too, and you add irrigation and recreate the map, take a note of these thresholds, 35 and 25. If you add irrigation to the mix and recreate the map, the thresholds went up to 40 and 35 to address that added driver of that leaching potential. There's more water going through the system. There's more potential for nitrogen leaching. So we're looking at variability in soils, and we're looking at variability in the driver to have those soils achieve that potential for leaching. It doesn't include how the nutrients are managed. That's your job or your aspect to this, that you would try to lean on all 4s of nutrient management to reduce the leaching potential, which was a concern in this particular case at a 40-point planting threshold. That's the underlying context between how the results show themselves and how the planning options that you're going to consider that field need to address those results. In the future, we are working on specific credits towards these thresholds for specific 4R choices, but we're not there yet. We're trying to get the information out there first and interact and see what kinds of opportunities there are to support the choices that you have to work with. Better timing, better placement, incorporation at the time of application, incorporation soon after application, adjusting the rate closer to what the crop removal is, spoon feeding during the growing season based on testing. All those kinds of options decrease the excess nutrient waiting around to be lost, yet still feed the crop well. So there's a double benefit. There's a benefit from an efficiency standpoint, and there's a benefit from an environmental protection standpoint as well. This isn't on the public site yet, but it's on our internal development site. Developing a report that you can then use in nutrient management planning. You can describe it the way that you want to. It has both the leaching map and the runoff map and all the thresholds as well. So we know that you need documentation, and right now this is an HTML report we're working on trying to transfer it to an Adobe document report. I started to connect to what Tim said earlier in terms of the 4 narratives that NRCS has internally. The first narrative is what many of you are probably used to. Basic nutrient management. In our system, we give it 20 points of credit. It's nutrient applications for the crop rotation. So there's a budget for the crop rotation, and we're trying to make sure that all nutrient applications that are included in the plan are needed. But there is an opportunity to be more specific than that. Nutrient applications only for the current crop, no application for a subsequent crop. That's better efficiency, and we're giving that more credit for its added ability to reduce nutrients hanging around being available to be lost before the crop can take them up. So we're trying to move at the same time in the direction of nutrient use efficiency and environmental protection by crediting, if you will, better and better nutrient management efficiency. The third narrative is the one that I think with climate change we're going to have to focus the most on, nutrient applications for crop needs at the time of application. Based on dynamic testing, based on dynamic monitoring of the weather, we only apply nutrients for the variable yield goal that we're expecting even during the production season. And we're doing that based on either tissue testing or other testing that shows when nutrients are needed, and we're only applying them as they're needed. My favorite term is spoon feeding, and that's about as good as it gets. So that's the best nutrient management efficiency. It takes time and effort to do that. It's expensive to do that, but there's a benefit in reduced nutrient use, but there's also a benefit in reduced environmental risk because the nutrients are only there when they are needed for crop growth and they're not available for loss at other times. So we give that the most credit from a nutrient management standpoint of 40 points. There's a fourth narrative that kind of directly connects to the site risk for water quality tool that I showed you, and that's meeting all the 590 minimums for site-specific risk of nutrient loss, which is exactly what the planning thresholds are in the site risk for water quality tool. So if you were able to achieve those planning thresholds, it would qualify for narrative 4 and would be the most credit in our system of 50 points. So as Tim said, we're trying to introduce the idea of variable levels of nutrient management, variable intensities of nutrient management that can help both with nutrient use efficiency and environmental protection and support more than the minimum, support all the potential benefits of nutrient management. Right source, that's pretty obvious. Right method of application can reduce nutrient loss, the right timing, all those things that are connected. The source, method, and timing are very connected to what the appropriate rate is. The rate needs to be based on a really effective source, method, and timing choice. If we're going to apply half the nutrients the fall before, the amount is going to have to be much larger because there will be quite a bit of loss. If we apply nutrients only as they're needed, we are going to overall be able to make more yield with less nutrient input. So the more intensive the nutrient management, the less environmental risk and the greater production efficiency. we're really thinking in terms of addressing climate change with more dynamic nutrient management that helps us both be more profitable and more protective in terms of dealing with some of the extremes that a lot of places in the country are seeing. So the more dynamic nature we can apply to nutrient management, the better armed we are to deal with some of the climatic extremes that we're seeing. The lowest rate per unit of profitable yield maximizes return on investment and profit. Fertilizer was very expensive for a while. It's a little less expensive, but it's always expensive at some level. So the more efficiently we can utilize it and substitute higher level management for product, overall, the system's more sustainable. Examples, if your nutrient management planners under source, something like an enhanced efficiency fertilizer can help increase the nutrient use efficiency and reduce losses. Method of application, incorporation or injection can help increase that efficiency as well and reduce losses because it is helping to prevent loss. And if it's not lost, it can make bushels. The right timing leads to that 4R prescription again to meet crop needs. If we're applying nutrients just in time, there's less opportunity for loss, and it reduces nutrient losses greatly in all pathways, basically. And the right rate, connecting all those together, we have to be looking at a realistic crop yield dynamically for that particular growing season, if possible. And something like variable rate technology is a wonderful opportunity to reduce the rate of application per unit of profitable yield. So varying the rate as things vary across the field fits into this very well. And it's especially useful when you have a high risk profile field, because the VRT not only helps make more efficient production, but it helps really reduce that loss profile on those fields that have a high risk for loss. So it's kind of a marriage made in heaven between the production side and the environmental benefit side. We just have to be able to support that more intensive nutrient management.
First question we received is, how do we know if we are double dipping using 157 and 590 and 217? 157/590 and 217.
It is not double dipping. Basically, the SEMA 217 only contains soil, manure, and source nutrient testing. DIA 157 and 590, those testing parameters were removed from the payments. So we want to encourage more use of the SEMAs. So they've been removed from the DIA and 590. So it would not be double dipping. And actually, in contracting, it would be really advantageous to say contract a 157 and then 3 years of 590. And what you could also do is, even if they don't have current analysis, contract a SEMA 217 and then a DIA 157 under the TSP, and then 590, implementing that for the next 3 years, if that helps.
Great, thank you. Next question we have is the SRWQ available now, and should TSPs be using this for plans now?
And I replied to that it was published back in October of 23, and it is available now. It is still being worked on. We are developing more of a print function now and some other functions like field identification. But the goal in the beginning, and Joe, you can add on to this, is that we really wanted to get the data. We wanted to get the tool available to folks so that you can grab the data and utilize this data when developing their plans. But Joe?
Yeah, it's live, and I would recommend that everyone try it out. And in terms of utilizing it to help guide your planning, it's a broader look, I think, than what folks are used to in the past. Some of you are used to the phosphorus index or nitrogen leaching index or other tools like that are kind of single focus. This is a broader focus. It looks at all loss pathways in both nitrogen and phosphorus and relates them to each other in terms of trying to guide planning for a particular site on its leakiest pathways, its highest risk pathways, the pathways that are more likely to cause a water quality concern, so that you can start to think about how to configure the 4Rs for that particular site to address its unique set of limitations. And you can really only do that when you look at a high level across all the risks for a particular field. That's really the place where this tool fits the best. And because it has planning thresholds in it that relate back to what we use internally, moving in this direction is going to make it a lot more compatible with the way we give credit for nutrient management in the future.
All right, thank you. Here's a question. My state and surrounding states use N and P loss potential through the nitrogen mitigation requirements and the P index. Does this replace that? Is it an either or?
This does not replace your state's phosphorus P assessment or index. This is a tool to look at the risk of nutrient application for nitrogen and soluble phosphorus, but it does not specifically replace your state's a phosphorus assessment.
And there's a process, right? Yeah, there's a process for that. Lots of states have specific assessments that are connected with what the farmer's required to do. This is more in a planning context of what would meet the needs of a particular site, and one will take some time to catch up to the other. When we start to look at things more broadly, it'll eventually trickle down into what's required. But where we're starting is supporting better planning as opposed to meeting minimum criteria. And one will eventually link to the other.
Joe, since we have a little bit of time, could we show that slide that looks at the different levels depending on the risk of that site? The one example that we had, I think that would be really, really good to show folks.
Was it the card output?
Too.
Yeah, the card output slide. I could probably try to find it too, but no, yeah, that one. So if you were to look at this slide, if you were to just possibly run, say you had to run a phosphorus assessment for your site, that phosphorus assessment, say you had high phosphorus and you needed to run the assessment in order to apply, that site, if you ran the phosphorus assessment, you probably would have no leaching loss potential from your phosphorus or surface loss, according to this risk assessment. But that would allow you to apply your manure and phosphorus to that site. But would you want to, if you look at the high rating for nitrogen leaching loss, would you want to apply that manure to that site knowing that there's a nitrogen issue there? Even though you ran your phosphorus assessment, you don't have the nitrogen parameters. So in this case, for this particular site, this may be better suited for maybe spoon feeding that crop nitrogen rather than trying to put, say, manure down. Maybe it would be commercial fertilizer spoon fed to that crop, because again, the risk for loss, risk loss in that site is for nitrogen and leaching loss on that site. Does that make sense? Joe, do you want to add?
I think it does, Tim, and it puts the phosphorus index in perspective in a larger context. And I think Peter mentioned they might use a nitrogen leaching index as well, but I'm not aware of any nitrogen leaching index that's directly connected to the phosphorus index they use. This process that supports CART and now is available in the Site Risk for Water Quality tool connects all of them for the soils on that particular site. So you're looking at them relative to each other, and that was what we were showing here with a low versus the high, but it also has these specific planning thresholds that need to be met for adequate treatment. So we are going to look at in the future, not only for nutrient management, but are there other practice opportunities to address this high concern for nitrogen leaching loss? So it's kind of a equilibrator to bring everything together in one place. The benefits of other practices, the benefits of more intensive nutrient management, and connect that with a site's unique risk profile based on its soils and climate. Which of the alternatives is most likely to solve the riddle for that particular site? It brings it all together in one place. That's its unique positioning.
I do want to just respond real quick. There was a comment about that someone received some rough feedback from a TSP on the Site Risk for Water Quality tool, thinking that it's too far in the future for us right now. The tool is actually very, very simple to use, as Joe demonstrated. And it's really, again, not really meant to replace the phosphorus assessment that you have from your state, but it's going to provide that risk assessment that you need to and for that site. And the parameters that Joe was showing on the screen there, they are actually required under NRCS Nutrient Management 590 currently. It's just very hard to obtain that information. Leaching, you can get some data from Web Soil Survey or actually from Russell 2. There's also other tools we can pull, but this tool actually pulls all this information in one AOI that you can simply just delineate, click on, and then you get the information from there. So just a huge breakthrough, I feel, for nutrient management. Joe, if you want to add.
Yeah. Depending on the water quality concern, I guess one of the newest perspectives is phosphorus leaching. If we've got an issue with soluble phosphorus impacting harmful algal blooms in surface water, and we've got a pathway where the fields are subsurface tiled, nitrogen and phosphorus both leaching to that tile and then flowing to the surface water is a major concern. It's not really related to runoff. It's really related to leaching potential. And the threshold for that kind of loss needs to be looked at in addition to the surface runoff threshold. So this helps you break it up by constituent, whether it's nitrogen or phosphorus, and loss pathway, whether it's leaching or runoff. And it helps you organize the chaos, if you will, when you're making selections for nutrient management, which selections need to focus more on a higher risk profile and which are probably, okay, even at a more general level because the risk of loss is relatively low. So it helps organize the intensity of how you'd want to prescribe nutrient management to address that risk loss. And the risk loss means that you're losing it. So there's a production dip or an economic hit as well. So it's information that you could use even if you weren't directly concerned about water quality. It's really a way to think about nutrient management that fits the site.
All right, thank you. Another question is the SRWQ tied to Web Soil Survey?
It's not, Joe, you might want to take that on, but it's not tied to Web Soil Survey, but it does pull information from the system that Web Soil Survey uses, correct?
Background information is compatible. It's actually on the Dynamic Soils Hub, which is for external people probably not something that you've heard before, but for internal people, it was a fairly rapid development cycle, a great partnership with multiple parts of the agency to try to do it rapidly. And we continue to look for ways to better meet both internal and external needs. So it's not just Web Soil Survey, which is great on its own. It's also trying to link to the way we support programs. It's also linked to the way we provide information. And we'd love to hear feedback on how to make it more useful to the public, because a big part of the job in nutrient management is not done by NRCS staff. It's done by TSPs and CCAs. So we really want to try to support that process in a compatible way that transcends the boundary between what we do internally and what's done externally, and give credit both ways.
Thank you. Next question. Once the SRWQ gets all the kinks worked out, will we use it instead of state-specific end leaching, et cetera? Does it incorporate these for each state?
The Site Risk for Water Quality tool is a tool that can be used for anyone can use it. We are not going to have any requirements to use that tool. You can use other tools to get the information. This is just a tool to really be able to obtain that information quickly, as Joe pointed out, and from a very simple way. So, Jonathan, you want to add to that? But
yeah, as Tim said, it's not required, but over time, we're certainly hoping that it makes it more efficient and it becomes the choice over time.
Right.
Yeah, the goal is to support better nutrient management. It's not to run a bunch of tools.
Right.
The specific thing that we need to do is think about an integrated way to support better nutrient management in a way that balances site risk with economic needs. We want to drive the more intensive nutrient management where there's more benefits to do that. That's really the foundation of this particular tool. It's not to meet regulatory requirements, it's to do better nutrient management.
And you need to kind of look at it as, I think there was a question regarding the phosphorus index. When you run that phosphorus index tool, it's allowing you to apply a nutrient to a crop that really doesn't need it to grow. You could almost use that phrase waste disposal of the nutrient, because you're applying that nutrient, whether it's a risky site or not, you're utilizing a nutrient on a crop that it doesn't need. The idea is to identify that risk and utilize only the nutrients that are needed to grow that crop. In some cases, if you have high phosphorus levels and you can't utilize that manure, what we want to do next is try to develop more ways to better utilize that manure off-site. Maybe it's if for liquid operations, dairy, you could be dewatering and selling that manure. Over here where I live on the eastern shore of Maryland, it's amazing how economics moved a lot of the chicken manure around in the last couple of years. Farmers saw the economic value of that manure other than commercial fertilizer because the price was so high. So it really moved a lot of that manure around to areas that actually needed phosphorus, versus where that farmer can then sell that product and then in turn utilize that money to buy, say, commercial nitrogen if they're needed or so forth. But a lot of different ways to address this. And I think the Site Restore Water Quality tool gets us a step, in that direction to better utilize nutrients more efficiently. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question we have is a question for clarification from John Cluthy. He asks, do I understand correctly that there isn't a current way to plan practices to meet the points/ratings?
Internally, there is. Practices get points internally. In this public credit, the component that we are working on credit for this public facing side is credit for configurations of the 4Rs. So you would get increasing credit for dialing in the rate to crop removal. So the closer you got to crop removal, the more credit you would get. You would get more credit for immediate incorporation than incorporation a day or two later, and more credit than a surface application. For timing, you'd get credit for a lot of credit for spoon feeding versus applying certainly way before planting, but even at planting. So there'll be incremental credits built in to trying to help meet these thresholds with specific configurations of the 4Rs, but that won't reach over to the practices. That's an internal process right now.
Okay, thank you. The next question is an anonymous question again. Is 157 and 217 acceptable in a schedule of operations for financial assistance farm bill programs in year 4 for the additional 4th and 5th year of implementing 590? 530 policy manual allows up to 5 years of management practices. 590. That's a clarification they added.
What you would do is, and we can talk offline, whoever wrote that, and but mainly you would contract the 157. We could do a 217 as well, but after you would contract 590, and you would contract that in years 1 through. It can be allowed up to 5 years.
All right. Next question we have, the form of the nitrogen applied also plays a significant role in losses. Manure typically does not have nitrate N and generally contains ammonia N and organic N, which have lower mobility.
That'd be under the form side, and that's actually one of the discussion points where with the current policy, we're having setback areas where we're not applying manure near waterways, and from a pathogen standpoint, that makes a lot of sense. But from a nutrient management standpoint, there's more to the story. We need to more carefully apply nutrients in that area if the crop is still grown there. So we might be considering manure there incorporated or something like that, whatever best fits that particular operation. But it's an absolutely true statement that form is important to loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The next question is just asking if the PowerPoint with notes will be provided. We're going to make the recording available through the NRCS TSP website, as well as the PowerPoint slide deck, hopefully within a few days. And we'll make that announcement out to all the TSPs that were originally invited and the state coordinators through email. So hopefully we can get that posted in the next few days for you guys. Thank you. One anonymous statement next says that Idaho's web soil survey was updated to add nitrate leaching potential. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that.
Joe,
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I don't believe it includes climate. I don't believe it includes adding irrigation. I'm hoping it's compatible with whatever we did. I don't know that much about it. I haven't looked at it. But the point of this is the intersection between the loss potential and the driver of that loss potential to trying to set the bar for how much environmental benefit there would be for intensive nutrient management. That's what we're driving at here. So it's not to look just at low versus high, but it's to look at which of those should be the primary concern for a particular planning area. And then from a threshold standpoint, when you've done enough to meet the need. So there's more to it than just a typical index.
Okay. Next question asks, is there any documentation available for this tool? What spatial data sets are being used to calculate the result values?
When you say, or Joe, do you want to it's documentation, you mean more as a print function? Is that?
Some of that documentation comes with it. You can download much of that information. And if you go check it out, you'll see what's there. And if you need to follow up on things that you don't see, like you said, Peter, follow up after this and let us know what would be useful to you. I think it gives the profile of a lot of the inputs that went into the results. And those are download options on the tool site. I didn't show all those details today.
There was a question.
And I think that's getting at the metadata.
That there is a button for metadata material. Actually,
yep.
Right? Yep.
Okay, great.
And there was a question regarding the output or print option that make it not just PDF, but have it as a I think it might have been HTML or some other types of formats, so it can be utilized to incorporate into other documents.
So, yes, the one I showed you was actually HTML right now. The map is actually interactive in that one because it's HTML and it's live. Yeah, we'll definitely try to satisfy multiple alternatives so that all the popular ones can be fed by it.
Yeah, and that gets to the comment that we received stating, please ask them to also make it available as a JPEG or some other picture file.
Okay.
It's very difficult to get a PDF incorporated into a CNMP. It must be converted to a picture file. So I think that's the comment that you were referencing, Tim.
Yes, yes.
Perfect.
And the service over time may be available in other planning software support tools. We're making this available so you can get to the results quickly, but making this available means that others could consider incorporating it in their softwares. So that could make it even easier to use as another layer in other planning tools, external planning tools.
Great. Next is a question from Cindy Wilcox. She asks, when I go to the SRWQ website, I don't see a map to put in an AOI on. It's blank. Too many of us logged on, or is there a toggle that needs to start up?
I'm trying to reload it. That's happened to me a time or two, and I reload it and it shows up. It might be some kind of service issue. If it continues happening, we'll take a look at that. Get back to us and we'll check it out. But if you're trying to reload it and it works, that's good for now. It's probably got more traffic right now than it's ever had, so it could be doing weird things that we haven't seen before.
Right, we're crashing it.
All right. Next question. We need to be able to submit bulk field shape outlines, i.e. shapefiles from ArcMap, and get bulk risk assessment outputs, ideally Excel compatible. Is this coming in the future?
We're definitely talking about just that, knowing that that's the efficient way to do it, and also to make this same process available inside of Conservation Desktop in the sensitive area tool. So yeah, we're definitely interested in making it more easily compatible in both directions, and also to export too. If your shapes are not inside NRCS, can we bring them into NRCS? And if they're in NRCS, how can we provide them back out so that we're not duplicating work?
Sounds like somebody lost sound a couple minutes ago. Hopefully they're back on. Another question from Maureen Pepper, the TSP coordinator in Idaho. She states, other states have NPL in WSS, Web Soil Survey. It's on irrigated and non-irrigated land. So I think that goes back to Idaho's comment earlier.
Yep. Would be very interested in the amount of irrigation to modify the natural rainfall aspect to this. So it would probably have to be more granular than irrigated or not irrigated. We'd have to know amounts to try to refine what the risk would be. But it's certainly related.
And then Chuck asks, what is the process of applying for a SEMA 217 and rates?
Right. So the SEMA 217, again, it can be used at any time during the planning process. So, for example, if the farmer doesn't have current soil analysis or manure, or they're out of date, you can contract a SEMA 217 before you get started with developing that nutrient management plan. Trying to think of anything else. SEMA 217. I think that's it. It can be done anytime. You can. Oh, one thing I did want to mention is the SEMA 217 does not contain tissue samples, tissue analysis, only soil and manure and source water. We kept tissue analysis under the 590 precision agriculture. Since we're utilizing tests in precision ag, we didn't want to double dip that in SEMA. So it's only the tissue testing is still under prescription. Advanced nutrient management under under prescribed nutrient management. So yeah, the tissue testing is not available under the 217. Did I answer your question? I hope. As far as rates, there are different payment scenarios for different types of operations and needs. I think I showed that in a slide earlier. There's scenarios for soil testing, for manure, for source water, for avenues for small plots, and also raised beds. So there's a wide variety of different scenarios that are available for SEMA 217.
Thank you. And
questions?
I don't see any other current questions right now. Maureen just commented that yes, it does, in regards to the answer earlier. And Cindy was able to reload the tool and get the maps got the map to show up. So so it seems like just reloading it makes the tool refunction if we got high traffic. So that's good. And we only have about 2 more minutes. We just want to thank everybody and appreciate all the questions and comments. And like I mentioned, we will be trying to get this posted as soon as possible to the NRCS TSP website, and we'll throw out an announcement as soon as possible. And if there are any other questions, I'm going to throw my email address in the chat, and you guys, if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to email me, and I'll filter that on to Joe and Tim and get you an answer as soon as possible.
Great.
Thank you, Peter, for hosting this and giving us the opportunity. And certainly hope we can continue the conversation, because we've got the right audience here to try to work to meet your needs better so that you can meet our needs better. It's got to be a partnership. So we appreciate the forum.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned, we are going to be trying to do a forum like this into the future quarterly, and certainly can work on doing more with you guys in the future if you're willing. And I think that's a great partnership. We do have one more question that popped in. We've got another minute. How is nutrient management planning being coordinated with irrigation management design, DIA 163?
Oh, that's a hard question. So it's separate. DIA 163 is irrigation, but 157 is nutrient management. They are separate, separate design implementation activities. maybe that's something we need to kind of talk offline. I'm really not sure of understanding the question.
In an irrigated area, certainly better irrigation water management is a benefit to nutrient risk. So there's definitely a connection there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a few more questions that came in. We are right at time, so we want to be respectful of everybody's time. But Tim and Joe, if you're able to stay on for a couple additional questions, if you got a minute or two.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. And we'll include this in the recording. Please know that you're under no obligation to go past the 2:30 Eastern time mark here. But since we got the experts here, we're going to tap into them. So there is a question, kind of more of a comment, 217 year one and 217 after the last year of 590 implementation. Okay. To monitor the difference between year one and the end of implementation of 590. Is that okay?
Yeah, it would be. It depends on when you need the new analysis. We require in 590 have analysis every 2 years. So yes, you can in fact utilize 217 and then come back in and contract another 217 to evaluate what was already done in implementation for that last particular year. But yes.
Okay, thank you. And last, we had a question about, can we get CEUs for this training? We did not apply for CEUs for this training with any organization. If you're asking about CECs for conservation planner, that can be approved by your state resource conservationists. But we can look into CEUs for this training as well after the fact with the credentialing organizations. Yeah. And we'll include that information in the email announcement when it goes out.
Yeah, apologies. I actually didn't think about that when we did this training, that we could have got CEUs. We still may be able to do that. I can pass it on to a few folks and see if we can get CEUs.
All right. And it seems like some folks are losing audio, so we might have timed out, but
okay.
I think that we are going to wrap it up here. And again, we appreciate everybody's attention and calling in, and certainly appreciate Joe and Tim and their expertise in presenting this material and information to TSPs.
Thanks, everybody.
And also a lot of staff too. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Take care. All right.